Or microphone? All right, we'll use this. All right, let's get started. So about this presentation. So this chat is mostly for folks who are in data ops engineering, DBA, data analysts, data scientists, BI analysts, or anybody who's been at any level of data. I'm going to try to keep it super relevant and talk about my observations in careers in data and what organizational strategies I've seen that work and that don't work. But before we do that, I'd love to get a sense of who's in the room. How many people here are in the data field in any of these roles? Raise your hand. All right, most people. How many people are looking to get into data science? All right, some people from this room. And then how many people are not related to data science, aka our stakeholders? All right, there we go. All the hard questions are gonna come from you. All right, let's get started. I'll start with a quick introduction about myself. So I spent the early part of my career, I have a fairly technical background, spent early part of my career in a very engineering role, building autopilots for helicopters, and then moved out to LA to work for Boeing, building autopilots for, or control systems for satellites. One thing that changed my career was doing an MBA and then figuring out that a lot of the engineering work that I had been doing in the past can easily be applied to businesses, and the field is now called data science, but there are many forms. People come from operations background, people come from engineering background, and it's a fairly easy transition. I've worked at various companies in data roles, and most recently, I currently am one of the co-founders of Retina, which works with other businesses and have had the privilege to speak with probably 1,000 different data roles, both as a supplier to companies and also having chatted with candidates who we've considered for Retina. And a few themes have emerged about careers that I thought would be really good to cover. But having said that, I think this presentation is not going to be successful without your input. So I'm going to try to run through this quick. I'd love for people's input and their observations at the end of it. And then also, when we're in the Q&A stage, if the conversation gets too specific, I might ask you to take that offline and have that conversation. So please don't take any offense. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. And Adam, wherever you are, can you give me a 5-minute warning so that I speed things up or skip things as necessary? How do you make a presentation about careers in data exciting? I have included GIFs in here to keep you awake. Hope some of you will find them amusing. All right, I'll start with a story around how data teams are done the wrong way. This is happening way too often, and some of you will be able to relate with this and see. So this is how it typically starts. An exec or somebody as a CFO, CMO reads about data science in a Harvard Business Review article or a McKinsey article. It's like, I need this in my organization. It starts to look for the smartest person they can find and hires a PhD in their team and like, yes, we have data science now. And the data scientist is like super exciting. I'm excited to join this company, comes in and starts to feel this way, comes into chaos and is trying to figure out what's going on. So here's what's happening. Most of the times I'm finding very experienced data scientists are getting hired at companies that are too nascent to have a data science team. You haven't built product yet, you don't have any data logging, no data infrastructure, and you're hiring a data scientist to do research. Bad idea. You can do most of the data analysis in Excel, and there's no need to hire a data scientist. So first thing, should have hired data engineers, put a data infrastructure in place. That didn't happen. Hired too few in team. Typically just hire one like super smart person and expect that to be a successful data science team. No clear goal what they should do. Yes, we have data science, but like what do they do? How do they have business impact? Haven't thought through that. And what ends up happening, you get relegated to running SQL queries or pulling CSVs out of Facebook and Google Ads Manager. This is how you're feeling at that point. So here's the impact on your career. If you join a team like that, you don't have a credible seat on the table with your stakeholders. Stakeholders typically are the finance team, the marketing team, product management team, So you're trying to build a recommendation engine or a recommendation for marketing or finance. It's not going to happen because there's nobody driving that growth. Limited career growth is going to happen as a result. You're sure you're not going to go anywhere because you don't have data to play with and present anything impactful. Moving goalposts, so priorities of the company, if they hire you too early, they might be changing too fast, and you're going to be going along for a ride with that, and that's going to be bad. Lack of usable data, no career guidance because there's typically not a person who has managerial experience on helping you guide your career and give you some career coaching along the way. What should you be learning? What should you not be learning? So these are all the bad things that can happen as you are going through. And as a result, we've seen a lot of data scientists churn or switch roles really, really fast. Data scientists are already known to be switching roles at the fastest pace than any other career and or any other role. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So how's data done better? I use the term better and not amazing because I don't think anybody has really figured it out because there's still a few cons of it that are very existential for data scientists or any data roles to think about. So first, you have to be in an organization that sees data and analytics as a competitive advantage. The whole organization does. You talk to anybody and their first question is, what data or what proof or what logic are you following to come to a conclusion? So that generally requires that it's being led by an analytically minded executive person who really has thought through this deeply and is open to listening to the recommendations of a data scientist. They'll take recommendations of what you should be stopping or what you should be doing and actually take action on that. Goals are set clearly and in phases. So this is a part that I really like when companies follow a structure and a larger roadmap. And when I talk about a larger roadmap, here's one that McKinsey suggests in their seminal paper they wrote in 2013 about how data science should be set up. And I've found this to be fairly true. So typically when you're starting out a data science team, first thing you want to establish is transparency and a single source of truth. And you don't do that by hiring the PhD data scientist right away. You start with hiring data architects. You start with data ops engineers and put a BI team in place, figure out a BI tool. The problem you're trying to resolve is that SQL dependency. Hey, can you run the SQL query for me, or can you get this data from me? That shouldn't really be happening if you've done this part of your data journey correctly. The next phase you move on to, if you get that first part right, you don't get to go to this part until you get the first part right. And if you get here, you should be enabling your stakeholder teams to do a lot of experimentation and forecasting. This is where the data scientists can come in and say, hey, look, to set up an experiment, you need to do your power test, make sure your sample sizes are correct. There's significance between your A/B testing and just the basics of it, but getting that muscle going inside the company is really important. And also, this is also an opportunity for you to get your reporting from being historical to predictive. You start to bring in some level of forecasting in your finance teams, and they start to pay attention to the data team. This is a part where you buy a lot of credibility. If you try to do this part before the first phase, you're going to lose credibility, but if this is done right, the data science teams start to get a lot of credibility. Then the next two phases are probably interchangeable, but important as well. Customization, bringing customized experiences to your users, to your stakeholders as you're expanding markets in the company, making sure that the same dashboard that you were giving to your marketing analyst before doesn't apply anymore. It's something that scales out and is customized is the next phase. And then the last phase is automating all this so that these jobs are, no longer does somebody have to press a button to run a job. It's kind of set up in some sort of an automated or a streaming way so that insights are getting to the right people at the right time. So I've talked a little bit about how data science is done wrong and how it's been done right. From a career point of view, here's my suggestion to you. Well, before I do that, let me tell you what the outcomes will be. So there is something about a lot of goodness that will come out of this. One is it'll have high impact on the business. You're going to be likely to be at the cutting edge of the data analytics and data science. Data people will be cherished and listened to. You'll have a lot of credibility. you'll get a chance to own the room. You'll be in meetings with executives where you will get to present and everybody will be quiet and listen to you. That means that they value you. And then your career growth is also highly probable. There's going to be resources that you'll get allocated, the team will grow, and then you're going to have to grow into leadership roles, and there's a lot of goodness that comes along with this. However, there's some bad even if you set it up right. And this is the part that I think I'll want to go a little bit deeper on. So data fatigue. So you only get to play with one data set. So even as a data scientist, you're there, you're working away and coming up with analyses, but you can only go so far with one data set. That's still going to be an issue. And you're probably still not directly contributing to the revenue of the company. You're probably still helping out the product team or the marketing team or the sales team that are like the true drivers of revenue. And the closer and closer you get to revenue creation of the company, the better your chances are of succeeding inside the company. Another issue that we've seen when talking to executives is the failure to tie day-to-day work to business impact. So this happens when you are working with a really interesting data set, working on an interesting problem, and you start to go into the research side of it. You try to figure out things that are really meaningful and interesting to a data scientist, but may or may not have a lot of impact. The reason this typically happens is if you hire somebody who is very academic but hasn't had a lot of business experience, what's going to happen is they're not going to know the depth of the business or the vertical and may not understand what the customer or the stakeholder needs. So overcoming these cons of even setting up the data right is probably fairly important as you're thinking about your career. So one thing that I will say as a recommendation before I head into this section is you could ask yourself, are you in an organization where the data organization has been set up correctly or not? And if the answer is that it has not, then you should open up that question with your exec or your leaders to say, hey, can we course correct to set up this framework correctly? I've found that if you reference, hey, look, there's a paper that talks about how to set up the management of the data science team correctly, most executives are fairly open to that. They just don't have the bandwidth to drive it. So you can be the driver of that change if you really wanted to. If that's not a possibility, that's when you should think about switching into a company that already has that thinking or has the right mindset. A couple of things to think about in terms of organizational strategies. So this varies from company to company, mostly varies based on the size of the company, but typically not based on what vertical you're serving. So let me talk a little bit more about this. So model one, large organization, centralized team. So this is, you're working in a super large organization, there's only one data science or one data team that has BI, infra, and data science. And you are working with different stakeholders. So the finance team may come to you, the marketing team may come to you, product team may come to you, they ask you questions or they have interesting business questions they want to get answered. The problem, there are pros and cons to it, and the biggest con to this is you have a priority mismatch. So pretty much everybody's unhappy with you because you're not prioritizing their work, and you're trying to juggle what is the right priority for the business? And you go to and ask different people and you get different answers. This is probably a model that got tested fairly well back in between 2012 and 2016, I want to say. But by 2016, a lot of the large companies had moved to either this model or model 3 that I'll talk about, which is distributed teams. So what they did is they took the data infrastructure team that manages the data lakes and the data warehouses and made that a common centralized team and distributed out all of the analytics and the data science functionality to the different organizations. So now if I'm a marketing or part of the organization, I can hire my own analyst as long as they get the data from the right place, we can do our own analysis. So now the problem is, now you have data scientists who are not collaborating, they're kind of operating in silos, and that creates a different kind of a problem where you might be coming to different conclusions about the whole business based on the analysis you're doing. So this is still not a really good solution. A third solution that I've seen at companies like Google or Facebook is a large org hybrid approach, so where they have a core data science and analytics team in addition to functional teams being able to hire their own data scientists. And what they do in these cases is they'll either co-locate the data science teams with the functions, and then those people will go back to their centralized team maybe once a week or twice a week to make sure that there's some level of collaboration going on. I don't think everybody has figured this out yet. The jury is still out on like if this truly works, but this is kind of where most of the large organizations are today. The story is a little bit simpler for the medium to small organizations. So if you're a medium to small organization, typically the data function falls under either the CTO, CFO, or CMO, and there's only a few people working on it. You know the guy who does all the data work for you, kind of just like know who to email or Slack when that's needed. The problem here is you're not the best. You'll never be known as the best data scientist because the company is so small so far that you're not going to be doing the cutting edge. You're just trying to meet the basic needs, and the goal should be to grow out of that as soon as possible and follow those phases of the data development that I mentioned earlier, so that you can get to a point where people trust you a lot and then give you more resources so that the team could grow and you could move into the larger org framework. All right, I'll quickly move into some recommendations, and I want to really get to the Q&A. I think that's where we'll have some of the really good discussion. So we're currently in a data role. Here's kind of the roles map, right? Here are the different levels. You're either you get hired at the analyst level, and then there's a senior analyst level. There's a manager, director, VP, and chief data officer. That's kind of the different levels. The roles, you could be in the infra and ops side, you could be in the business intelligence, the scientist part, which is doing a lot of research, developer, DBA, or measurement. And the different functions are product strategy, ops, finance, marketing, growth. These are generally what the map looks like. So if you drew a three-dimensional map, you pick all of these variables there. So my suggestion to you would be pick which path you're on. Like first of all, if you don't know where you are, figure out which function you're in, which role, and what level you're at. And then have a conversation with your manager or leader on what it takes to get to that next level. I think the problem that I see in the data science community today is these vary very differently between smaller, medium, and large companies. A director of data science at a small to medium company in an e-commerce is very different from a head of data science at Uber or director of data science at Uber. The skill sets are and the competence level are vastly different. So figuring that out would be really helpful. Two existential questions you should still think about. I think this is very important. Is your work directly tied to the revenue stream of the company, as I mentioned? And if it's not, how are you getting closer and closer to that over time? And if you're not, should you think about a career change? And are you growing your skills after working at this place after 2 years? Are you kind of saturating? Because the saturation part is very scary. As most of you know, data science, technology, and the algorithms, everything is moving at a very rapid pace. And are you getting the learnings? Are you getting sent to training? Are you having the opportunity to go to conferences and get exposed to a lot of new techniques? Are you somehow reading up on papers or attending talks where a lot of this is happening? So these are two things I think every data scientist or data professional, I should say, should constantly be thinking about with the evolving technology. One other thing I want to talk about is careers out of data science. Data science should not be the end of your career if you're excited about other parts of the business. Typical paths out of data science, if you've done a good job at it, are product management, depending on the type of business, operations management, biz dev, client partnerships, as well as marketing are very common, and I would recommend looking into that. What if you're a job seeker and a switcher, or a switcher? What are the businesses looking for in candidates? This is really, I think one of the best research I've found in surveys, I think this is very, very true, focusing on business impact. Most businesses would rather hire somebody who can understand deeply the business and focus on the business impact than to do something much smarter but have very little impact. Many companies, I have at least 3 examples of our clients where they've hired data scientists and have to let them go after 2 years because they just waited around for them to have an impact, but nothing ever came of it. Bringing diverse skill sets. So this is also really important. No longer is the case that you can only be a data scientist or an analyst. You have to learn some amount of data engineering. Companies expect you to come in and do end-to-end work from pulling data, synthesizing analysis, and putting together presentations and charts and communicating it to an exec team. You have to be able to do all of those skill sets, and it's much more preferred. You still want to have some level of deep expertise in some sort of subject matter expert or some sort of vertical or business understanding. This is partly why citizen data scientists, people who were not data scientists and actually learned some coding, are really useful, because they already bring some sort of skill set in some field in marketing and sales, and then they've learned data science, and they're bringing in a lot of like business experience to the field, and they have a pretty good competitive advantage. Lastly, realistic expectations. I think businesses also are looking for data scientists who don't think of themselves as unicorns. I mean, we all get to read articles about how much data scientists are getting paid and the kind of benefits they get. The truth is, half of them don't, and you should come in with the expectation that the more realistic your expectations are, the better your opportunity to grow in your career and also look for new jobs. What are candidates looking for? So this is interesting. They're looking for flexibility. There's some truth to this. I think this is actually good, because the kind of work that we do in data as a data professional is a deep knowledge work, and deep work requires you to have flexibility. If you're tied to, hey, I have to be in the office 9 to 5 and this is the only time I can get work done, it may not be the best approach for data scientists. So there's a good reason they're looking for flexibility. Career progression, it obviously makes sense. Most of us are very motivated individuals and want to see our career progress faster than our peers. Competitive salary makes sense. Good management, good company culture comes up. But I want to end my talk with a couple of interesting stats that I found. This is still a very largely gender-biased field. Only 23% of professionals in this field are women, and if you look around, this is probably fairly true even of this audience. Job seeker market, 72% of the professionals would leave their current role for the next good opportunity. So it's still a really good time to be a job seeker and a candidate in this market. Highly flexible, looking for high flexibility in work, and a lot of them do have. 64% claim they have work flexibility, where they can work flexible hours or work from home. And what's really interesting is 2 years still remains the typical length of time in a role. Think about the typical career stat. Most Americans change jobs 7 times in their careers, of a career of 40 years. And if somebody's changing jobs every 2 years, that's an insanely outlier number, which is kind of crazy. All right, those are all the things I wanted to share before I open up. One other thing I'll share is some resources. So I'd love for folks to read this. This book is one of the best books. Adam introduced us to this book, and we've brought this into our work culture to quite a bit of pretty deep extent, I would say. This is a really good link. Once we share this presentation, you'll be able to get to this. The 5 dysfunctions of a data science team, machine learning engineers versus data scientists. So these articles will have things around like what are the skill sets you need to be a data scientist, the typical like Venn diagram, all that stuff is in here. I really highly recommend checking out the salary guide. This is, if you're going to do a job negotiation, I highly recommend taking a look at it and using this as a benchmark. Most people should already know this. But a lot of the stats I shared with you guys are from here, so should be very useful. 2 other links to do a shameless plug around Retna. We wrote a couple of articles. Our CTO wrote these 2 articles around data ops principles. So if you're in that stage where you're trying to get transparency in the organization, that's stage 1 of like setting up a good data organization, these data ops principles are really, really good. We've set up all of our Databricks instances based on these principles, and also the 7 ways machine learning projects fail is also a very good article to kind of look at all of the pitfalls you might run into. All right, with that, I'll open it up for questions.